Na re. Season. Pedig a Blizzardnál is volt valami kopasz szám régen. Nekem úgy rémlik. Ja, igen. Még aki a Hodge-ot csinálta, a Dustin Broder. De ja, egyébként szerintem a én nekem legalábbis, nem azt mondom, az emlékeimben ez van. De régen én úgy gondolok a Blizzardra vissza, hogy ők is ilyenek voltak, hogy leültek beszélgetni akár a bármelyik játékossal. Most már nem tudom elképzelni, sőt, nekem ez a Campfire-ös beszélgetés a Diablo 4 miatt is meglepetés volt. Pozitív meglepetés, de azért ott is érződött, hogy mintha bizonyos témákat vagy kérdéseket egyszerűen csak így leszalnának és kikerülnének. Ami így, ja, fasz. Svetvin. Hát nekem login. Nekem mindenképp login. Hát a most augusztusi liga az nagyon baszó, főleg úgy, hogy konkrétan tudsz most már szanktumozni is, hogyha akarsz végig. Ez az új liga mechanika is nagyon faszán néz ki. A PoE 2 meg, hát... Csak ki kell várni. Igen. Amúgy egyébként az elején én is így éreztem, de most már egyre izgatottan vagyok, úgyhogy egyre többet láttam és belegondoltam a dolgokba. Szia Dorogos Jucika. Hát most hatalmas bejelentések vannak, azért van nézettség. De alapvetően amikor új liga van, akkor is elég nagy nézettség szokott lenni, meg nagyon sokan játszanak. Az én véleményem szerint nagyon jó a PoE, igen. Ja, hogy igen, így. Hát úgy viszont mindenképpen aggódni lehet. Igen, havonta, így havonta, vagy nem, másfél havonta veszel 3 hetet.
Take it away.
Hey everyone, I'm Dane. I'm a 3D art person at Grinding Gear Games.
Yikes.
More than that, I got my fingers in a few different pies. I kind of know a bit about rigging and animation, and come from a graphic design background, so
Szia Brit.
I'm a bit particular about the 2D part of the item art, despite being a 3D guy. So I'm going to get into the
Nem ugyanaz lesz elvileg.
aspect of PoE2's items, and I'm going to pass it over to Hrishi afterwards to talk about the wonderful numbers stuff you guys.
Elvileg nem ugyanaz lesz, viszont nem fogják egymást fedni a ligák teljesen. Szóval tudod azt csinálni, hogy másfél napig játszod a PoE 1 ligát, jön a PoE 2 liga, azt mondod, elég volt a PoE 1 ligából, azt elkezded a PoE 2 ligát. És utána meg másfél hónap után újra jön a PoE 1 liga, kb. Így kell elképzelni. Szóval így végig tudod játszani a PoE-t, anélkül, hogy abba hagynád gyakorlatilag.
The 2D art is the part that you're picturing in your head.
Hát igen, Twin, ez baj, igen. Mert, hát igen, ezért mondtam, hogy...
All the way back to the 90s, like when I was a kid playing Diablo 1, you didn't see it on your character, the inventory was where you saw it, so it was the most important thing, so you'd look at this little...
Hát amúgy ezzel gyakorlatilag meg lehet majd csinálni valószínűleg, hogyha így lesz, ahogy mondtam. Hát nyilván a pontos részleteket még nem tudjuk.
For PoE 1, obviously you see your 2D art on your 3D model, but
meglátjuk, az még messze van, messze van. De így is lehet mondani. Szezonálisan mindenképpen. Az vagyok már most is, de...
PoE 2, the 2D art always comes from the 3D art because we render it out at high quality. In the past, the 2D art was a bit of a mishmash of all sorts of stuff. This is random stuff that I've grabbed from the icons folder. Some of it looks like a 3D model, it's like A-posed. Some of it's like a photo, just a straight up photo. Some of it's like super cartoony, like this guy down here. It ends up with a very inconsistent kind of front end to the game. Like you guys are used to it. You play the game so many years and items get added over time that it doesn't really matter. But it was always a bit of a problem to me that things look inconsistent because different artists have different approaches to how they just paint and render and do things, and sometimes they'll be like, we need a unique yesterday. So someone will just get a photo of a shield, I guess. And so PoE 2, these aren't the same items as the previous screen, so don't freak out that Calm's heart now looks like that, because that's not it. This is just an example of similar size stuff. Basically, every single item, even if it's a small thing, gets through the full treatment. I was modeling little gum nuts for that little potion bottle right there just to render it. The flasks are all
De most azt megmutatja, hogy ezek hogy nézhetnek ki karakterem?
And the goal is that you get a consistent image on all the items. So everything in your inventory, everything in your stash, it's going to look clean and like it came from the same place because the rendering is like the great equal.
Ja, amúgy igen, tehát hogy a Twin is megérti ezt, csak kicsit úgy gondolta, hogy jobban állnak. De egyébként szerintem sokan úgy gondolták, hogy jobban állnak ennél, de szerintem senki nem akadt ki ezen, hogy csak jövőre lesz. Mármint, hogy jövő nyáron lesz béta. Szerintem mindenki megérti ezt, és mindenki így van vele, hogy inkább legyenek kész, és akkor adják ki, mint hogy előbb szár legyen.
These things always highlighted a problem with me in the game, because I'm a visual person, and I'd glance at stuff and I'd go, what is that? It's round and it's a shield, and I'd be like...
Ja, szerintem mindenki azt spekulálta, hogy még idén béta. Hát akkor meg mindegy, Gergő.
You know what it is, you've played it a million times, you've seen all these items, but I think for a brand new game it's even more important to really get things nice and clear. So what I'm doing with all the main primary stat shields is they all point that way, and the split ones go that way. For stuff like this where they're all round, I think is really important because, again, as soon as it drops the name, it's always going to be something buckler or a Taj, and you'll just know, okay, that's a thing, that's Dex. And it's sitting in your inventory. You don't even have to you just glance at it and you'll just know. Same thing with like axes is a good example because axes to me always look like they can be two-handed or one-handed, and they're kind of frustrating to look at. Again, I've chosen to make the one-handeds go this way, two-handeds that way. It's like a small thing. Trying it out, it might get rolled back later. They might all end up facing the same way. I personally like it. Just a few base types from the axe. This isn't by means all of them. This is just some of them. Like I said, even the small stuff gets the same treatment. So we got some amulets, and these three, I'll let you figure out what they might do.
Amúgy ezek azt mondom, hogy ezek is faszán meg vannak csinálva. Kicsit fura, főleg úgy, hogy PoE 1-es szemmel nézni ezeket, de úgy ezek, ja.
Painted like that, and they go, well, I just have to repaint the whole thing then, I guess, which they don't.
Ja.
Currency orbs, same thing.
Oda nézd be.
These were a fun one because we got to redesign what we thought of them as. Previous head honcho Eric, who's now retired, this was his little baby. He's actually printed massive scale cast bronze of these things. He's got a huge exalted orb that's like this big. But yeah, it was
meg a transformot, meg a portál.
them to be more cohesive, so they've got that.
Vagy mi a Wisdom plusz portál, jobb oldal.
Roman kind of bust head thing going on with a lot of them. Yeah, and so they all get the same treatment, even if they're a little cool guy. Some armors. So these are the base types. First 6 for the different character branches. So I don't know if you're able to tell, but there is a gradient that occurs here. So it goes from Dex, Dex int strength, strength Dex. Oh, sorry, strength and then strength Dex. And it kind of loops around where the strength Dex looks a little lighter, and it kind of that's a personal thing as well, just trying to get things to be very clearly gradiented across the items so that it feels like you can just glance at stuff and just know what it is. And this comes into the naming of things, which is also, as a visual person, it's another thing. It actually had an impact on the art in a cool way as well. So every single Dex base type armor will be something vest or something coat. Same with all these. They're all going to be called that. And you might go, oh, that's kind of limiting. But that limitation actually kind of breeds really interesting creativity to actually accentuate them more. And like I said, you get a cool gradient that happens as you go through the stats and it loops back around. So everything's strength will just look massive.
Faszák, azon ezekre is így elnézve őket, hogy faszák.
What's the unique? The bronze one?
Faszák.
Massive.
Brass dome.
Brass dome. There's a base type that just is that big. You know what I mean? Like same thing with all the items. A pet peeve is when you're working on all these things. So many things get called boots, helmet, gauntlets, and after a while, from the art managing side, I got really annoyed. I was just like, what is this again? And so it was like affecting the management part as well as me just reading stuff in the game as well. So they're all going to be basically partitioned in a way, naming-wise, that affects the art a little bit. It's not as strict as you would think. Like, say, if I go, I'll let you look at that for a little bit. Like, say, the gauntlets, right? They've got like, these ones here have got a bit of a leather bracer aspect that kind of starts transitioning over to what the Dex ones do, which will be only focused more on this area. And they kind of spread out, and so there's just more identity between them. Here's a good example actually versus Pee-wee 1, because I think the Dex Int gloves are called the mittens, right?
Yep.
And that always bothered me.
Jó, csak hogy ez nem is az, hogy most ez olyan nagy valami. Kicsit így inkább azt mondja el, hogy könnyebben ezt beazonosítani majd a dolgokat, mert hogy most egy csomó mindennek így. Hogy mondod ezt? De nehezen megállapítani, hogy mégis milyen type a base. Ja. De így viszont akármilyen gloves, azt tudod, hogy mondjuk intes. Most meg ugye a Poe 1-ben csak így tudod, hogy mi a neve, és akkor abból tudod, hogy ja, ez a mit tudom én, ez milyen base type. De itt most viszont tudni fogod, hogyha ez a neve, akkor az fixen intes. Vagy dexes, vagy akármi. Ja, azért mondom, hogy ez nem egy nagy valami, de teljesen jó. Meg igen, ez is, hogy úgy is néznek ki nagyjából az itemek, amit elvárnál tőlük.
The difference between base types and uniques in Pee-wee 2 from an art perspective. It's something most people, I guess, don't think about, but we're trying to treat the base type items with very clear, distinct lighting, but it still is stylistic. It's not just this flat, like I just threw it in the renderer and hit render type thing. Like we have place lights, and we've tried to make it look as cool as it can. It's very clear and subtle. There's a bit of warm lighting, a little bit of cool, that's about it. And the uniques don't really have any rules. We just sort of make them look as bold and interesting as possible. And the other thing is, every base type in Pee-wee 2 will have a unique associated with it at launch. Every single one of them. And every single base type has unique art in and of itself.
Az komoly.
Base type that repeats. You will not get a shield later.
Már most több unique van a Poe 2, úgyhogy kísérlet, mint a Diablo 4-ben.
Entirely unique art all the way through the game. So, to me, the unique, having a bit of a bond with the base type that it comes from is kind of important, because otherwise it kind of ruins the item identity of both. If you had like a unique sword that was like a scimitar-looking curvy thing, but the base type was just a straight blade, it's kind of like, shouldn't that be with the base type that has a curvy blade? It's like kind of common sense to me. So the shield in the middle is a pretty good example. They're very similar structurally, but very different in terms of what actually happens.
Hát amúgy, ja, kb. Úgy kell kezdeni, hogy ott van a Diablo, azt a Poe meg egy ilyen sandbox játék ahhoz képest, ahol így mindent lehet modifikálni. Diablo meg így van 10 statast, akkor abból 7-et tudsz, vagy nem tudom. Valami így lehetne talán viccesen elmondani.
This is an example of the lighting of these things. So this is actually a unique armor that they don't know about. Doesn't do anything yet. That's lit how we would do a base type. And then here I remove it all, and I try to give it some more character, make it look a little bit more moody and a little bit more special. And we do this for all the items. We hand place and we pose the meshes and we try and get a really iconic little look to it. So that's the difference between those two things. And here I might get Rishi to sort of pitch me back in because this is going over the specific rundown of gear. So in each act, you will find gear specifically for that act. So all the base types will look like they're very Maraketh in Act 2. And as soon as you get to Act 3, they're going to look very vile. And you purchase them
Yep.
just from the vendors.
Yeah, so the vendors of each act only sell gear that comes from that particular act. They don't sell, like, you don't go to Act 2.
Vagy Diablo-ban hogy mondták ezt?
One gear.
Kb. Úgy lett előadva ez a Diablo-ban, hogy azon a területen olyan itemek esik, mint hogy ez valami revolúció lenne, bazzánk. Valami ilyesmire emlékszem.
People were worried it was too big, and I said it might not be big enough for me. I wanted it this thick. Anyway, so this sort of getting into the art focus of items in terms of some tropes that happen with fantasy art in games quite a lot that kind of bug me. All that stuff is obviously AI crap. But, I mean, it looks cool. When I was 13, I would be like, hell yeah, it's got spikes all over it. But after a while, you've seen these. They're in everything. There's so many games that have that, and just loads of it. And you can infinitely produce, AI just did 4 of them like in half a second. Whereas this stuff is from our world, and it goes back centuries, and there's just a rich history and culture behind all this art making and weaponsmithing from like just different metal making practices in all these different countries, India and like old cultures like the Scythians and the Mongols and how it all blends in. And I think artists need to do more to really learn from the past to make more interesting looking stuff. This is what I want Pee-wee 2's items to feel more like these really rich, dense things that have all this history behind them. We do a lot of investigation on the environment side with stuff. Like early on, there was talks of like how the Maraketh would write musical notation and how that would affect sculptures on the walls and like the environment art.
Ez komoly azért.
Trying to get that
Úgy
into
hangzik.
the item designs and stuff as well. So a lot of thought goes on there to like get things to have a real rich sense of culture, because for a game that's all about items, you don't want everything to just look like a jagged spiky sword every single time, or like just cool flaming blade of blah. You just want, like, there's a place for them, but having just like a spoon, it's just a weird spoon, and that's the unique, is kind of cool to me. There will be a spoon.
Jó, nyugi.
What is it going to do?
You figure that out. So this is the part I really like, is that
De mi ez a töredék, nem?
a lot of weapons and items and stuff.
Vagy az a mostani ligában volt?
Oh, this is a drop, by the way. This is nothing.
És legalábbis úgy néz ki.
If I could have a screen that went all around the whole building, it still would get them all. They'd keep going. There's many. Anyway, they don't know about them most of the time. I'm just making them.
Hasonlít inkább csak.
I sort of give it to them, and to me, it's kind of like they've actually found a unique, and they don't know what it does. Like it's actually unidentified, and they have to be their own little Deckard Cain and be like, "What the hell does this do?" Which is really exciting to me. Like I don't know, this little weird wand up the top that is basically a hand holding a bell. I just wanted a hand. You hold a hand that holds bell. And so I just think, well, there's cool stuff there. Does it like reverberate your spells? Does it bounce things back? I don't know. Does stuff. It'll be cool, I promise. But
De jó, ezek jó mondanak. Jó, mondjuk ez nem egy olyan nagy valami nyilván, de...
Anyway, that was just a little tease of stuff. I just wanted to just show you that the items for Pee-wee 2 are going to be very rich, and every unique is going to have a lot of interest and just flair and just feel like it came from somewhere. It wasn't just like always just it looks cool. Like some of them are just they look cool, but a lot of them are going to be really well thought out. From the art side, I don't know about the numbers. So this is where I pass
Ja
it
nem,
to
GG,
this
nem
guy.
tudom, itt ez a main műsor, ez... Ráadásul ez, ami most megy, ez éjszaka volt tegnap. Nem sem úgy tudom, hogy tehát ez más nem élőben adják a tegnap hajnal 4 órás ezért. Éjfélig, éjféltől meg újra élőben van reggel 7-ig. Ugye, mert ez Új-Zélandon van, szóval ott 12 órával előrébb vannak. Szóval az élő az délbe kezdődne náluk, élőben megy a stream, de, de ez az egész az felvétel most.
There's so much more to them, right? Like we want items to feel real. They're more than just a collection of stats. And now that PoE2 is
Mondjam nevét, Dominus, nem az a neve?
to look at items all the way at its very fundamentals and try to make some changes that we couldn't make in an existing game because of the worry of how you would port existing items over to a new system. So I'd like to go over some of these fundamental changes with you. So this is the first problem that we really wanted to tackle. In Path of Exile 1, different weapon classes don't necessarily feel that different from each other. Like just take an axe and take a sword. There are some light stat differences, you know, some of them have, you know, faster swing speeds or faster damage per hit, but how much does that difference actually matter? So for this reason, we added implicits to all the weapons. So, you know, every sword has an accuracy-related implicit in most cases. Axes don't have implicits. Maces have stun-related implicits, and so on. And it helps. It gives them a bit of identity. But it doesn't really make them feel that different, right? Like
amúgy ebbe igazuk van, de szerintem a régi poésokat ezek már nem is az, hogy nem érzik, hogy ez egy nagyon nagy dolog, de ja, alapvetően amúgy igen.
I want to talk about the attribute, like attribute alignments in this game, and we consider this very important as a way of aligning certain attributes with different mechanics in the game. There are some new weapons in there. I'll let you look to see what they are.
Hát azt hiszem, a Diablo-ban talán egy implicit van, vagy nem tudom, minek hívjuk.
With different attributes, and that gives us a
hogy mondjuk
like some guidance on what
crit van rajta, vagy egy stat van rajta, és ennyi. Az a különbség talán.
Evasion is aligned to dexterity, energy shield is aligned to intelligence. And damage is no different, right? Strength aligned weapons generally have higher damage per individual hit. Dex-aligned weapons are usually faster when it comes to their swing speeds, and int-aligned weapons are usually really good at dealing critical strikes. So, you know, using this as a baseline, it's kind of clear that, you know, a mace is going to have higher damage per individual hit, whereas a claw is going to be faster, and, you know, a dagger is going to have more crit, and so on. So, we have tried to emphasize these differences really heavily in Path of Exile 2. So I just have, you know, a random dagger from the dagger base types picked up and a random axe. And you can see the difference in critical strike chances is much higher than what you might be used to. So a dagger is going to start with 15%, and then you have mods that improve it over and above that. So when you're using a dagger, you're really going to feel like you're critting a lot. Whereas an axe, you can see the base damage of the weapon is going to be, you know, like per hit is going to be quite a bit higher. But all this too, like this is going to change like how you view weapons, but it's still not entirely enough as well. Because ultimately the difference between a mace and an axe, for example, is the sort of attacks you can do with it. So we have, so in Path of Exile 2, most attacks are going to be usable with a single weapon. So this immediately makes designing new attacks a lot more interesting because you're not thinking, what's a cool attack? You're thinking, what is a cool thing that an axe in particular can do? So, let's talk about axes. So, axes, as you can see from the chart, they will be slightly faster than maces. They do slightly less damage per individual hit than a mace, but they're still primarily strength aligned, so they're going to do a lot of damage per hit. But on top of this, what defines an axe thematically are themes such as culling and executes. And in Path of Exile 2, you can throw them. So that leads to really interesting skill design, because you can throw them, wait for them to return. You know, it's almost like a boomerang. Daggers. So daggers are sort of 50% in the int section, 50% in the dex section. So they're both high crit and high and have decent swing speed, but obviously per hit their damage will be lower. Thematically, what do you think of when you think of a dagger? They're mostly all about fast attacks, trying to find the weak spot of enemies, which sort of perfectly matches what they are in this.
Hát ugye a Spear is új weapon type végül is.
And they're also thematically linked to
Se nem végül is az.
really come out in the skill design.
Meg a Flail.
Daggers. So when you have this identity of item class
Meg a
sorted in
crossbow.
this way, you don't need to have an implicit that is on every single weapon of that type. So we've removed them.
Ja.
All swords do not have, an accuracy implicit. All daggers don't have, a crit implicit and whatever. So now that the implicit slot is empty, we can make interesting implicits that sort of make certain bases throughout the game feel very different to each other. Because it's not super interesting if you're just going up a ladder of slightly stronger and stronger bases. We want to throw something in there to make the upgrades not feel too monotonous. So we've added some.
Na, ez nagyon érdekes.
And I'd like to show you some of them. So this is an axe. You'll find it at a certain level, and you might notice that this deals no physical damage whatsoever. Its base damage is just pure fire. So this is going to give you some interesting considerations when you find it. Like, how are you going to build for it, especially if the axe before and the axe after is mostly physical? So it's not just that it's a damage upgrade from the previous axe. There are these other interesting considerations to think about as you go through. Here's another one. Yeah. So this is a mace that destroys enemies that you kill with critical strikes.
Ja.
Now it sounds pretty useful, right? That
Hát, ja. Meg nem csak az van, hogy na jó, akkor most mi a következő item base. Ja, izé axe, oké, akkor 28-on amaz az axe, izé 30 ezén amaz az axe.
It could be useful, but how do you make it useful? It's not interlined, so it's going to have low crit. There will be.
És ez csak a leveling, de főleg mit tudom én, hogyha nem a leveling közben nézed, akkor meg nagyon sokféle hasonló, nagyon sokféle axe, csak most az axe-okról beszélve, lehet érdekes. Csak az implicitje miatt. Vagy csak a base, vagy hogy mondod ezt. A típusa miatt.
If some of you have played the demo and have played the warrior class, you might have noticed that they have a mechanic that breaks enemy armor. It's primarily a mace mechanic, but there is a dagger that does it here. Like, the mace skills are normally the ones that interact with this in a number of ways, but, I mean, a dagger does it. Breaking armor is obviously useful, and that makes this very special and build-defining. But how are you going to best make use of something like this? Oh, that's an exercise left to the user. I'm sure there'll be a million different broken things that'll come out of all of this. So, I've spent a bunch of time talking about attack weapons, so let me briefly touch on caster weapons. So, in PoE 1, they were quite strange, right? Like you had a staff, and they had attack mod, and they had attack attributes, and they could roll attack mods, but you're a mage, you don't want to hit people with the staff, you want to cast your spells. And as a result, their mod pools are a lot worse because you have both attack mods and spellcaster mods rolling. Like, of course, they did improve your spellcaster mods, but because there were all these mods rolling on the same item, it was really hard to get a good one. We tried a bunch of band-aid fixes over the years, like I'm sure you're well aware of us introducing rune daggers and splitting staves into regular staves and war staves, but they didn't really fix the underlying issue. So we
Na, erről beszélek, hogy ezek is nagyon jó gondolatok, és hogy ezt hogy akarják változtatni.
So, in PoE 2, wands and staves will have no attack stats whatsoever. They just come with a skill that costs no mana. These spells can be a number of things, from just a straight up
Zoltán.
spell like this one, which is the first staff you get as you wash up on the beach, or a number of other things that can be used alongside your other skills. The later ones obviously tend to have a few more interesting considerations. Like this one will be very familiar with anyone who's played PoE, where this lets you triple cast your next skill, which is obviously really good for skills with really long cast times. here's an example of. Pretty fun, right? So you might be wondering,
Ez
what
kicsit
about
ilyen...
people that want to
Yeah.
hit people with staves? So we have split out the melee portion of stave into its own weapon class called a quarterstaff, and it's sort of thematically linked to the monk.
Én miatt megvettem, az hogyha akkor is mondtam már, hogy drága, nekem a stream is benne volt, hogy megvettem, akkor én streamelem nektek, én élveztem, de én megmondtam, hogy drága, majd biztos, hogy még lesz kis diablózás, de én mondtam akkor is már, hogy majd, hogyha a poel jön például, vagy lesz, akkor nyilván én inkább poézok.
We've talked about the two, I would say, core archetypes that we sort of support in Path of Exile 1 with attackers and spellcasters, but trappers and miners, of course, are another archetype that sort of got left in the dust a little bit in Path of Exile 1. Like, they were fully supported with a bunch of skills and everything.
Lastapok.
But they didn't really
Jó
have
amúgy.
gear that
Szerintem az Lastapok teljesen jó, de azt nyilván úgy kell kezelni, hogy az egy kis cég fejleszti, és még nincs kész.
They're not a mage, they're supposed to be mechanically aligned and that sort of thing. So we wanted to add an item type that can be used specifically.
Én Tarkovból nem vettem meg sose, vagy nem vettem meg, vagy jó, ez nem igaz, mert megvettem, de azért, mert új már elküldte konkrétan az árát, mert nem bírta ki. Nem? Az a legdrágább, nem tudom melyik legdrágább.
This is an example of the new base type that you can use in your main hand. It takes both your hands and
Hát köszönöm neki nyilván, de... Hát majd lehet lesz Tarkov, hogyha pont úgy jön. Én bírom a Tarkovot, nekem nem volt baj a kevés helyjel, vagy nekem én megvoltam vele, kimondottan vicces volt, hogy még kevesebb hely van, aztán úgy kell pakolászni, de... Na tessék, Jamie, közben figyelj a trapre, detonation type, proximity. Jó, de csak augusztusban ugye jön a Baldur's Gate, amit fogunk nyomni, meg a Poe is, szóval nem tudom mikor. És még az, hogy C2 is, ugye. Úgyhogy majd meglátjuk, mert lófaszra sincs idő. Persze. Hát az van mondva, hogy nyáron, az lett mondva legutóbb, hogy nyáron jön, a spekulációk szerint még mindig nyáron jön, augusztus ugye nyilván. Nekem az Armored Core az annyira nem tudom.
General support type characters. Like, we've tried a bunch of, band-aid fixes over the years, like about the Convoking Wand, and we've added bone rings, and we've done a few of those things, but they don't really fix the root of the problem. They do help, but what you really want is a set of items that you can find throughout the game that is specifically for, this particular class. And we, as you know, we've added Spirit as a concept, which is for our skills that were previously reserving your mana, but it also is about your permanent minions also use your Spirit. So if you want more zombies, there's no such thing as just getting plus zombies. It's just increasing your Spirit gives you more zombies. You can use as much of your Spirit as you like to get as many zombies as you like.
Egyébként ez is nagyon... Nem tudom, hogy lesz majd, milyen lesz ez majd, de nagyon jól ki lett találva, hogy nem manából reserve-ölsz, hanem kitalálták ezt a Spiritet, amiből reserve-ölsz, és a Poe 1-ben most még mindig óriási nagy izék vannak, hogy reservation-t hogy oldod meg, reservation efficiency, mennyi manát reserve-ölsz, hogy lesz mana ezért, és itt meg ugye ezt így átgondolva kitalálták ezt a Spiritet, amit ugye tudod azt csinálni, hogy több Spirited legyen, és akkor abból reserve-ölsz. Úgymond.
You get to have that flexibility where, if you're not planning on doing much attacking or spellcasting yourself, then hold it in your main hand, have a shield, and you're pretty defensive, and you get to buff your allies or your minions, or your allies and your minions, I should say. But if you want to, let's say, do some attacking as well, then you can just hold it in your offhand if you like. And then you can still have a weapon in your main hand, you can do some damage, for something like, a build that would be similar to dominating.
Ja, ez nem most volt, amit én mondtam. Ez már tegnapi dolog, csak hogy most itt olyan Sceptréről beszéltem, amin ugye Spiriton és ezért jutott eszembe.
But just be careful not to use the extra spirit that you gain to use your minions, because when you swap out, your minions will go away. So we've talked a bit about skills before. So as you might have seen in the keynote, we had a big problem with how skill gems dropped in Path of Exile 1. Because the more skill gems we add, the less chance you have of finding the one that you particularly want. And because to solve this problem, we added gem vendors in Path of Exile 1 so you could get one at any time that you like. But that isn't also the correct solution, because what that means is it's just trivial to get any gem at any time. And at that point, why are they even itemized? Like, you should just have access to your skills, right? So in Path of Exile 2, we wanted to both have the fun moment where you find a gem of like a higher tier, but also we wanted to not prevent you from just using a skill that you want to use.
Egyébként ez is nagyon érdekes és jó hangzik amúgy.
So we've added uncut gems. So regular skill gems no longer drop, and you just find uncut gems of a certain tier. And you can use them to turn them into any skill of that particular tier. And they come pre-leveled. So what that means is it's a lot easier to switch into a new skill, because you don't have to then re-level that skill from level 1.
Igen, tehát konkrétan találsz egy ilyen uncut gemet, ami level van, és te választod ki, hogy milyen gem legyen.
Like, you can just seamlessly swap from one to the other. What this means is certain gems just don't exist at lower levels. For example, I think Firestorm was a 28 skill in Path of Exile 1. So in this, so here you might get Firestorm at level 5, and levels below level 5 just don't exist.
Extrém részlet.
So let's get into the meat of the matter, which is item drops. As you all know, we want item drops on the ground to matter more. You generally don't pick up rares on the ground because you know if you're going to pick them up, 9 times out of 10 they're probably going to suck, right? Like you're not going to use them. There are a number of reasons for this.
Azért mondjuk ez nem igaz. Tudod, hogy milyen rare-t veszel föl.
In PoE 2. But there is one particular reason that I wanted to talk about.
Az meg a másik.
That is actually because of how the Chaos Orb functions. So, if I pick up, let's say, a helmet of item level 70 and another helmet of item level 70, and I use a Chaos Orb on both of them, it doesn't matter what you picked them up. It doesn't matter what item it was that you picked up originally, because they're now completely new items. The only thing that mattered is the item level of the item that it started with, in both cases. The mods that they came with just no longer matter anymore. So every base type is effectively the same, just as good as every other base type for the purposes of, for the purposes of a Chaos Orb anyway. So picking up a rare at that point is identical to using a single Chaos Orb on that same base type. So we're making a change to how Chaos Orb works in Path of Exile 2. So rather than re-rolling the item entirely, it replaces one mod on the item. Just one. So this means the item that you start with matters a whole lot more when it comes to this. Because you pick up a rare, it has, 2 to 3 great mods, maybe 1 or 2 really bad mods. Those rares previously were not going to be useful because it didn't matter that it had a few good mods, because it also had those bad mods that sort of made the item not worth using. But now what you can do is you can just, like every item is away from becoming a really great item. Whereas previously those rares were still not good because they didn't have those good mods. And now
Connected.
You will hopefully use your Chaos Orb.
Channel switched.
A lot of these sort of near
Hello.
Just use one, and if it doesn't work out, well, the item wasn't that fantastic to begin with anyway, because it still had those bad mods. But
amúgy ez jó is.
bad mods turns into a good one, then
Nem azt mondom, hogy rossz. Inkább jó, mint rossz, de picit... Hát rossz is, mert nem lesz káosz végülis, de...
But if this was the only change, then the best way to make items would be to, start from a magic item, spam your alterations, how many ever thousands it would take.
De amúgy, most belegondolva jobban, ez egy nagyon jó változtatás is lehet.
But the first one is that alteration orbs will no longer exist in Path of Exile 2. So the way to do this is you must start with a good magic item or a good rare item, or you can create one with a transmute or a Chaos Orb. Now, to help all these changes, we have gone through every single item and looked at their mod pool and made changes to every single item's mod pool. So almost everything will be different to help you with this process of making item drops matter more.
De nem rossz ez. Értem, hogy mondasz, Kreisz, de nem. Én azt mondom, nem. Mármint belegondolok egy kicsit.
Our philosophy on unique items is that they must be the best item for
Mert miért
startup,
tehát ezt nem is értem, amit írsz, Szergej. Mármint valószínűleg nem komoly, amit írsz, de
now,
tehát, nem is,
now we obviously feel like
tehát
unique items are
még a közelébe se vagyunk, azt se tudjuk, hogy fog működni a
item on every single base type.
bármilyen.
Some of you may not know this, but before I started working at GGG, I designed one of the supporter uniques way back in the day.
Szóval inkább nem is mondok semmit, mert nagyon sok minden nem tudunk semmit.
For the unique items of this game. The support unique that I made back in 2013 was Cloak of Defiance, which resulted in the Mind of a Matter keystone. And I've been involved in making unique items ever since Breach, which is...
De egyébként ez miért
It's been quite a while.
még belegondoltam így is, miért inflálnál ezzel? Ez ugyanúgy jó lesz. Ez ugyanúgy nagyon jó lesz. Mert így a káosz most, az gyakorlatilag tényleg arra van, a mostani értékében, vagy mostani értékében értékesebb lesz, igen. De hát nem tudjuk, hogy mennyi fog belőle esni. Meg nem tudjuk, hogy... Nagyon sok mindent nem tudunk, tehát igen. Nagyon sok mindent nem tudunk, és ja, nagyon sok mindent nem tudunk, felesleges. Most, per pillanatban.
Like Dane mentioned, every base type will have a unique, and that includes a lot of new uniques. But don't worry, what this also means is we are going to be bringing a lot of your favorites from Path of Exile 1 into Path of Exile 2. Because is it really a Path of Exile game if you don't have a Headhunter or a Shavs in it? Yeah, exactly. So they might be slightly different to what you might be used to. You know, a few stats might be different here and there as a result of the mechanics changing, but they will be instantly recognizable as a result. And you'll have a lot of your favorites that you used to that you used to like playing with in Path of Exile 1, and you will have a lot of new ones as well to find as you go through. So
Pool 2-es Headhunter?
I think that's everything from my end. I guess we have some time for questions.
Come on, Zachy.
Hello, my name is Zach, and I'm a game designer for GGG, and I will be doing the questions here. And while I wait for people to submit some questions, I will ask one I prepared earlier, and that is, does the art of the item dictate the design, or do you design first and then get the art for the item?
It can be very different depending on what is necessary at the time. Like sometimes we just have to make a lot of uniques in a really short amount of time. And if we have art available, then we try to fit the stat to what the unique art is already there. But generally sometimes it's, you know, we have this crazy idea that we're like, can we do this? And it's like, well, it sounds cool, let's do it. And then we make an item and it's just a blank item without a name, without any art. And then we try it in game, it's like, this unique is awesome. And then we make the art for it. So it can go both ways. I would say,
De mennyire szar volt a heted, vagy mi van?
at least in Path of Exile 1, it's been mechanics first into art. But, you know, that may not be...
Yeah, and for PoE2 it's more the opposite for now because for a long time they didn't really know what they were doing with items. And as basically a blacksmith that just smashes things out really quickly, I was just like, that's a cool sword, that's a cool sword, that's a cool sword. I just make all this stuff. And yeah, they're going to find that treasure trove of stuff and turn it into stuff. But I think it's really valuable to have art that can inspire gameplay stuff that they weren't even thinking of. They might not even have, it never entered their mental space.
Oh yeah, that happens a lot, I would say.
They'll just see it and go, oh, this thing's like split in two, and it could be like, you know.
Ádámnak nagyon rossz volt a hete.
Right here, I don't know. Like, okay.
So let's see what else we've got here. Do you have any memorable uniques from PoE1 that you have designed?
Oh, that is a tough question because I've made so many. I think one of my favorites, or at least I would say very memorable, was Indigon. Because Indigon was probably the start of that entire set of mana-related spells that followed later. But Indigon was really the first. It was the first item that weaponized mana into a form of damage.
Yep.
I have a thing for that as well.
Yeah, I was gonna ask for the outside if you have any like of your favorite art pieces.
I've been doing pretty much most of the unique since I guess whenever Betrayal happened. I came on board a little after
2017?
that.
Maybe?
Oh wait.
Maybe?
Last 5 years. something like that.
Ádám irigykedik, mert ők kín vannak Új-Zélandon, és
Done
ott
a lot of
nagyon jó
art for
most.
them, and the art has a very different name to the final game. It's not even close. It gets changed. An interesting one to me is the shield everyone knows as the Squire. I think it's the thing with 3 white sockets.
Yep.
Yeah, I made them have 3 white sockets from
Yeah,
an art perspective.
I remember.
Because I modeled 3 white sockets, eyeball things on it, and I was like, it's going to have 3 white sockets.
Yeah, I actually remember this.
And they were like, okay.
Well, it was busted anyway, so adding the 3 white sockets, I don't know if it really changed too
Yeah,
much.
so I just made more OP. But on that same day, I made that, I just made it. And they were like, oh, we need another shield. And I was like, okay, I'll make a cooler one. So I made a cooler shield visually, and that ended up being the oppressor. And I was very bummed about
Trash
that.
to trash.
Definitely wasn't the cooler shield.
If I
in
knew,
game.
I would have not made it that cool looking. I would have dug some trash out
Ki
of it.
csodálkozik, Ádám? Senki nem csodálkozik.
Let's see what else we've got here.
Vagy én nem tudom.
In terms of
Ki
making
csodálkozik.
art and I guess items for an act, how are you like getting inspired or taking inspiration from?
We have really strong art direction people. Some come and gone. Shout out Chanda. And they really just put a really dense fabric of thinking over all of the acts, like really going into Marraketh and Val and Karui and others I'm not going to talk about. And just basically we would work with them and establish like common shape language and like themes and stuff and just to make things feel cohesive and part of that world. Same kind of patterns and shapes and stuff like that. And yeah, it's the most interesting part, I think, because it sort of, you create stuff no one's ever seen before, kind of, because it's like, it just doesn't, you know, there's like weapons made of like cactus wood. Like, no one makes weapons of cactus wood. But they were like, oh, these people, they only have access to cactus wood. So the handle has to be cactus. I'm like, all right. I can't have just wood, otherwise it breaks the theme. It's like, well, where'd they get that wood from? It's like small stuff like that.
Another question we have here, are there versions of the early game bases that have stats appropriate for, I guess, towards endgame?
Oh, yes. So those implicits that you will see throughout the campaign will be repeated in endgame, in sort of endgame bases. So if you happen to like, you know, something that an implicit enabled earlier on, you will be able to use it later on as well.
Yeah.
I mentioned that earlier.
I guess this is in reference to the Chaos Orbs. Will Alk Scouring still work?
No, it won't, because there will not be any scouring orbs.
Yeah, they're gone.
Na mondjuk.
Adam, you're gonna have to alk a white one. Why is there no 75% int, 25% strength or dex weapon? So like, why aren't you fitting more of the
Mondjuk nagyon érdekes. Ez egy kicsit úgy hangzik, hogy szar, de aztán meg lehet, hogy pont ezért lesz jó.
There actually is a few.
Mert nem az lesz, hogy van 600 Scour Orb, meg Alchemy Orb, meg
Some of the staves will have skills that are
mindenféle orb.
you know, strength interline spell, and then that
De meglátjuk. Az a baj, ezt nehéz megmondani, csak azt mondom, hogy ez ilyen úgy hangzik, hogy aztán közben meg lehet, hogy azért mondom, hogy ez kicsit úgy hangzik, hogy de aztán lehet, hogy ez így sokkal faszább lesz. Elmond azt, hogy 5000 alteration-t tárolsz, és akkor spameld az alteration-t, hogy kijöjjön valami szar, ami nem jön ki soha. Fusing nem lesz.
This is part of Exile. You're going to use an int weapon, a strength skill, and everything, you know?
Fusing nem lesz, mert úgy működik, hogy minden karakter alapból kap 9 gem slotot, és ezeket a gem slotjaidat tudod valamilyen, nem is tudom, valamilyen neve, de valamilyen itemmel több linkessé tenni. Szóval nem tudom hány darab, több 6 linked lehet, mint 2, ugye?
I think that sometimes it kind of makes itself up as it goes, but there are times where like there's obviously characters and they have stuff. Like there will be bosses and things that a unique weapon is just straight up like you'll get it off them kind of thing.
There have definitely been times where we've made a unique with some story behind it, and then we've expanded on it at a much later date.
Yeah.
So it's always nice to have these sort of story threads that we can then follow up on later on.
This could be interesting. Was there a memorable unique you tried to design that couldn't be implemented for a technical reason?
Oh, yes, actually. There are so many of these, but I think my favorite example is, so there's that helmet that drops from Kurgal, the boss in Delve, the Lich from Delve, called Hail Negator, I think. So originally, the effect of what that helmet was supposed to do was it was supposed to do what the Agnostic Keystone does, where it was supposed to drain your mana and heal your health. But for technical reasons that I don't actually remember now, it could not exist on an item that also had energy shield on it. And it couldn't exist unless it turned off your energy shield. So when we were doing the Legion Keystones, we had to come up with something completely different in the last week before the release of Delve. But I always really loved that idea because it was just a really cool thing that, and then when we were designing those millions of keystones when we were doing the Legion, like the Timeless Jewels, this idea just came back and I just kept pushing. I was like, we got to find a way to do this because it'll be really awesome. And eventually, the way we were able to do it was, well, if you turn off ES entirely, then we can do it. So it sort of works as a downside, which, I mean, it probably did need one at least at the time, but it also was a technical reason why it needed to exist.
And I guess as the last question before we run out of time here, are there item types with all three attribute split?
Not currently, no.
I want them.
Yeah?
For now.
For now.
And with that, we have run out of time for this panel. So.
All right, thank you very much.
Ja, azt nem tudom, Twin. Most per pillanat.
Anyone from Australia?
Na most jön. Ez érdekes. Na ez érdekes lehet. Veki, Path of Exile van. Coming up next. Geci TV. Na ez mondjuk. Ez mondjuk pont nem. Ez mondjuk pont annyira nem. Jó, ez mondjuk pont annyira nem, de fél órát kibírunk, nem? Most addig nem fogok mást, azért nem csinálok addig mást.
Na hello.
Na hello.
Mehet egy gyors LOL 2v2, úgy hallom.
Addig menjen egy 2v2.
Persze.
Na, jó van. De ha háttérben hallgatjuk, akkor...
Pont belefér a fél órába.